Studio 550, this is the board meeting on KTRS.
It is 9:10, Big 550 KTRS. And we are running a little limited today because soon-to-be Speaker of the House, John Deal, first has to win his election to become Speaker of the House. And he's out running his campaign, so he's busy. So we're going to give him the day off, let him do his deal. And so we're going a two-man show today. Jay Kanzler, attorney, filmmaker, and all-around gadfly. Good morning, Jay Kanzler.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Jane.
And Jane Duker's with us, attorney, political consultant, and former chief of staff to Governor Holden. Talk about some of the issues of the day from the people who are out there on the front lines. First, let's talk about your Attorney General, Eric Holder, who told the leakers to, well, first of all, it was leaked. CNN reported that Tom Jackson is going to be fired. The county police are going to take over Ferguson. Ferguson's town is going to cease to exist. And it was denied. We don't know where these reports are coming from. And then Eric Holder said to the leakers, shut up. You're not doing yourselves any favors. I'm mad and I'm angry. And then proceeded to say that Ferguson will be changing in the near future. You can guarantee it because we're looking into all of these things. Jane Duker, what are your thoughts as you watch this argument over the leakers and the Attorney General telling people to shut up?
Well, I mean, I agree that people need to shut up. You either need to have the full transparency or you wait for the process, which is what we've, been talking about for weeks now. But the problem I have is that some of the leaks are coming from the feds. Mm-hmm. I mean, so, look inside and, and talk about people who are getting briefings from the feds and the feds who are part of the leaks. I mean, that was specifically reported by a St. Louis,
well, the Washington Post,
right.
The Washington Post had the story, and the New York Times had the story about the feds who were leaking, and that somebody close to the federal investigation said, if this is all the evidence, Officer Wilson's or Michael Brown's civil rights have not been violated.
Right. So he, I think he needs to be a little clearer that there's enough shutting up to go around, because I think the other thing is that sort of the failure to delineate that, I think, also leads to further sort of unrest and further distrust of the system, because automatically the local people say, oh, it's coming from Bob McCullough, or it's coming from the Ferguson Police Department, or it's coming from county. And there's really no evidence of that. And in fact, both the county and the county prosecutor's office have been very clear. In fact, they pointed out that the documents that were relied upon in some of these reports specifically indicated that, that they were given, briefed to other people and did not originate from the county prosecutor's office. So I think it doesn't do the situation any favors.
Right. The county prosecutor, who's been so maligned, there's no leaks coming out of there.
Correct.
There are leaks coming out of the feds.
Correct.
And the Attorney General is telling people to shut up.
Right. And I think he should be a little bit clear about that, because I think Bob McCullough has come up and said, wasn't us. County police, wasn't us. I mean, they've at least answered the question.
Right.
The feds really haven't answered the question as to whether. So I think it leads to people being I think it leads to rumors, because every time there's a leak, people assume, oh, the grand jury's coming out. And I mean, I would be shocked. No one's going to just dump this indictment and say, let's hope for the best.
How much of the criticism of the leaks is over the fact that they're supportive of Officer Wilson?
Everything.
Well, everything.
If the leaks supported Michael Brown's supporters,
the Darren Wilson supporters would be very upset. I mean, the problem is once you leak, no matter whether it's the only evidence or only some of the evidence, the side who doesn't like that is going to complain.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of the colander calling the pot leaky. I mean, the federal government, that's their modus operandi.
Right.
Is, anonymous sources and leaking. And I think to your point, McGraw, if these leaks were more supportive of the position that I think the federal government and Eric Holder had laid out for themselves early on, that this was an awful crime that had been committed, and they were going to set about to prove it. I don't think the facts are proving that out, and I think they're a little upset, Eric Holder included, that this information now is getting out there. I agree with Jane. I think this information is coming, for the most part, from the feds themselves.
Now, here's the next question I have. How much of this is Eric Holder part of the game? In other words, he's shocked that there's gambling going on here.
Right.
If they're leaking the information to soften up the ground, to get the information to help with whatever happens, and he plays the part and says, you guys leak it, and then 3 or 4 days later, I'll chastise whoever's leaking to sort of cover ourselves. How much of this is a giant game? Jane Duker, you've been in the highest offices here. How much of this stuff actually goes on all planned out?
Well, I mean, I think the one thing you can say for sure is that the feds have every bit of evidence that the county has. So
We know that. Bob McCullough said that.
He said, I am sharing everything. So
Right.
whether Eric Holder knows on his own, clearly the DOJ has been provided all the information that the county prosecutor and the county police has, and the FBI has it. So they are aware. Eric Holder has not said that the prosecution is being unfairly pursued.
Right.
He is not saying that McCullough ought to step down because he's biased. He is not, I mean, what he is not saying is as important, if not more important, than what he is saying. And so I do think, we have the situation where Fox reported all these changes. I mean,
Right.
that didn't happen in a vacuum. So there are discussions going
Right.
on.
Somebody's giving
Yes.
somebody information.
Yes. And so, do I have any doubt in my mind that a bunch of politicians, federal, state, and local, are sitting in rooms talking about how they're going to handle the situation and how they can make this better? I prefer a more frontal approach where we say, look, we don't have to assume there's going to be riots here. We need to change our mindset. Our mindset needs to be that we're going to do everything in our power, like they did in LA for the Rodney King verdict. We are capable of handling this without riots. And I would rather have the discussion sort of be more open about that and the policy stuff. The prosecution, I think they need to seal that up until it comes out, because there's no good can come from partial leaks, some leaks. Who knows if it's all the evidence? Who knows if it's some of the evidence? But with regard to dealing with what's going to happen when the grand jury decides and what policies ought to be out there, I think that should be more transparent than it is being right now.
The whole part about what's going on in the city of Ferguson, these kind of things, in terms of the proposed changes that CNN is leaking, it
Right.
doesn't surprise me it wouldn't surprise me if there are a bunch of state, local, and federal officials sitting in a room saying what they would like to do with Ferguson and not inviting Ferguson to the table. And then
Right,
one
you
of the
don't
ways,
usually invite the violator when you're,
or the one you're trying to impose your will upon.
Correct.
And one of the ways to impose that will upon them is to leak it out there as though it is in fact true, kind of get the idea out there, get people used to the idea, then invite them to the table and say, wow,
easy way or hard way.
yeah. And so
Because the hard
Ferguson's
part
denying
is nobody can impose their will on Ferguson without a federal court order and some sort of, which I'm not sure DOJ will do.
Ferguson is a town of 20,000 people. They have a mayor, they have an alderman, a council, the whole deal. It's a functioning city. And if they're going to sort of dissolve Ferguson, for lack of a better word, what about Pine Lawn?
Well,
what about Velda City?
Well,
what about all
they
those
can't
other
even do
cities
that.
that are so egregious? And Ferguson at least
Frankly, are worse.
Are worse. They
As
are
far
worse.
as economic development, I mean, Ferguson, before the Michael Brown shooting, I mean, you had a community that was turning the right way. They were increasing businesses. They have accredited schools. They have a diverse population that
They
for
have
the
billion-dollar companies within their borders.
The
Exactly.
notion that the city of Ferguson needs to dissolve itself over this incident is crazy.
Right.
This is a city. These are people that are a community that were doing just fine. They had problems. We all have problems in each of our communities.
Right.
You don't come in and say, okay, a bad thing happened. We are going to erase you from the map.
But I also think too that this is a decision that the people have to be involved in.
But clearly they're not, because no one in Ferguson knows what's going on.
Well, I'm not talking about the electeds. I've about had it with all the electeds. I think the people actually, and that's why this One Ferguson group is very promising. It's a very interesting. I saw some reports on it, but I think the people need to be involved in that. DOJ is not going to go to federal court and get a federal court order saying the civil rights violations are so bad that we're going to get to take away their city identity. Yeah. Okay, this is going to happen at some point with the assent of the people, either the state legislature or the locals, because they can disincorporate themselves. St. George did it. Other municipalities have done it. So, but I think putting these things out there, like you said, as ideas, trial balloons to try to get people focused on this stuff, I wouldn't be surprised that there are electeds and politicians doing that.
All right, you guys are pretty well connected. What are you hearing in terms of when the grand jury is going to be done? because there's this, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this November 10th, week of November 10th, which is the week after the elections, is somehow this magical week that all this stuff's going to come out.
Well, that's, I think, based on what Bob McCullough, the prosecutor, has said. I mean, I think he said that they are targeting for mid-November, that they believe that that's based on what's going on now, that would be the date. So I think, to me, that's the best information we have, is that, that's when the grand jury will be presented, fully presented with the case. And so I think he's been pretty open about that.
Do the feds release their civil rights investigation at the same time?
They don't have to.
They don't
Absolutely
have to.
not.
So
no.
one
and they
can
haven't
release and
before. And in the Jack in the Box case, the county released all the evidence. Nobody ever really came to see it or talked about it after it was released.
Right.
But it was pretty long after that Justice came down and said, we didn't
so
find
Justice
any.
Department could take a year, could take 6 months, could be whatever.
There's no
Well,
mandate.
especially with Eric Holder stepping down, there may be a new timeline. But I think from the very beginning, you'll remember at the time that it looked like the St. Louis Cardinals were going to make it to the World Series is when they first started talking about extending the grand jury.
Right.
And I think it was very clear that no way was the indictment information coming down during the time of the World Series.
Right.
The next date then is the election, and there's no way it's coming out before the election because it would have a significant impact on the election. After Tuesday, November 4th, the election's over, the World Series is over. I think the indictment's coming down that week.
I tend to, my conspiracy head tends to lean more with you. These leaks only started after the Cardinals exited the playoffs. And so there was no more, hey, they're going to bum rush the playoffs. There's going to be protesters at the World Series. We have 50,000 people and protesters clashing. That's bad. But once the Cardinals were out, then it leaked on a Friday and it leaked on a Sunday. And so there's something that just doesn't make sense to me. The leakers know exactly when to leak things. It hit on a Friday and a Sunday. And so that looks to me like it was a concentrated effort after the Cardinals were out to start to soften up the ground.
I agree.
Might be.
Yeah. All right, it's 9:22 here, Big 550 KTRS. Jane Duker and Jay Cans are both on the show because they both agree with me. That's why they're on the show.
Oh, no.
Back in a moment, 9:22 here, Big 550.